หน้าตาก็บ่ดีผู้ดังก็หักโตก็ดำผิวพรรณก็บ่ดีบ่ให้แต่ง
You thought my fat shaming video was gross? Then buckle the fuck up, baby. It is time for me to post my second video on what I consider the 3 Thai drama sins: fat shaming, colorism, and sexual assault. It's gonna take me a lot of willpower to make the third video in this series. But before that, let's tackle the second Thai drama sin, colorism. So what is colorism? It's the systemic discrimination of people of color with darker skin tones. In the West, it's very heavily tied with racism, where even though people of color are at a much higher rate of facing discrimination in general, inside of that there's a hierarchy of discrimination that is often much worse for people with darker skin tones. Colorism is a very broad topic and there are so many amazing videos on it. I'll list some of my favorite by creators of colors down below. I also want to tread lightly with this topic because even though I'm a biracial French Lebanese woman, as you can see I am embarrassingly pale. And I've also never suffered any type of racial discrimination in my life and likely never will. That being said, even though I'll never experience colorism, I don't think you need to experience discrimination for you to call out something that is so blatantly hurtful and dangerous. I know, basic empathy, right? Crazy. In Thailand though, colorism doesn't have much to do with racism, simply because Thailand in particular was never colonized and stays a country that is globally composed of Asian individuals. In Thailand, most of the immigrants are other Asian people, and even non-Asian immigrants will stay a very small minority. That being said, there are a lot of sub-ethnicities in Thailand, so it's not like it's not a diverse group of people in its own rights. And I do think some colorism can stem from discrimination of these other Asian minorities in Thailand. So I'm absolutely not saying racial discrimination doesn't exist in Thailand, but here colorism is more so linked to classism and the very white-skinned beauty standard present in most of Asia. And I would sadly say that colorism is much more blatant in Asia than other parts of the world. For most Asian countries, being white-skinned is synonymous with beauty and success. As in the past, people with dark skins were the one who had to work in the sun all day, meaning of a lower social status. Now though, not many people work in the sun all day as most people have an office job. So skin tone obviously has nothing to do with status or beauty at all. It's just genetics. The skin you were born with. But this blatant colorism and classism is still highly prevalent in Thai society, where beauty always equals light skinned. Therefore, you cannot be beautiful with dark skin. You are excluded from beauty because of the skin you were born with. And as you know, on this channel, I like observing Thai culture through its media. So today, I'll be doing just that. Here I have created 4 categories for the examples I've decided to show you today. But I'm gonna be perfectly honest in saying that this is only maybe 1% of the colorism present in Thai dramas. For having watched hundreds of Thai dramas and movies, I can safely say that sadly, colorism is present in at least 50% of them in a systemic way. So sadly, my video today is barely scratching the surface. Pointing out the color of someone's skin. So something that is really prevalent in Thai dramas and I assume Thai culture in general, something that doesn't quite happen in Western culture for the most part, is simply pointing out the color of someone's skin. In France at least, pointing out if someone is light-skinned or dark-skinned wouldn't be something used to describe the person, but rather their race or ethnicity instead. But in a country where immigration is not as huge and diverse as France, and where most immigration comes from other Asian countries anyway, using the race of someone as a descriptor would only come up if you're talking about a foreigner or a mixed kid, so not very often. Instead, to differentiate between Thai people, the whiteness or darkness of someone's skin is used to describe them. Seeing as Thai people come in every shade, from very pale to very dark. So far, if there wasn't a very clear bias in favor of whiteness against darkness, I wouldn't have an issue with skin color being used to describe someone. But you know that this is a video about how bad colorism is. So it's very clear that even a simple descriptor word creates a problem. In Tumons, Kit describes Ming as being neither too white or too dark.
สูงชิบหายสัก185ได้มั้งไม่ขาวไม่ดำ
Which is said in a way that even though he's not pale enough, which side rent, Kimon's skin is actually very white for Thai standards, even though it has quite lightened over the years. like most Thai actors and actresses. Knowing skin whitening products are literally so normalized everywhere in Asia, it's not surprising either. But anyways, the implicit meaning of that whole sentence is that while Ming isn't white enough, at least he isn't dark, which is apparently the worst thing that someone can be. In Lovesick, No's white skin is also often commented on, explicitly saying that it makes him more attractive, but also in a way more feminine. No says to Poon that even though he has white skin and red lips, that doesn't mean he's gay, equating these things to beauty and therefore femininity, which we know to be heavily relying on beauty since patriarchy sees women as objects only there to be pretty for men's pleasure.
ถ้าแฟนน่ารักอะทุกอย่างก็จะง่ายขึ้นไอ้เหี้ยกูผิดใช่ไหมเนี่ยที่กูเกิดมาเป็นลูกคนจีนตัวขาวปากแดงเนี่ย
In contrast to No Who's Very Pale, we have his best friend, who was originally played by a light-skinned actor in season 1, but was replaced by a darker-skinned actor in season 2. And while the first actor didn't get his skin commented on, the new actor sure did. Wonder why? Sure, as far as I remember, he doesn't get insulted for it, which we will see later is a very real possibility for darker-skinned actors. But just pointing it out is enough for me. It's telling the actors and the viewers that their skin, something that is inherent to them that they were born with, determines their value. So, yikes. The obsession with white skin. That idea of commenting on other people's skin can often evolve into the obsession with white skin. That's something that is so common in Thai dramas, I honestly don't even have that many examples because it's everywhere. And it manifests itself through two things. Firstly, the obsession of very pale characters to not lose their fair skin. So there will always be a white-skinned character who talks about not wanting to be exposed under the sun because they don't want to tan and lose their fair skin. I remember Aim from Lovesick saying that during the beach episodes.
เอมไม่ไปเล่นด้วยกันน่ะชวนมาเองนะอ๋อแดดมันร้อนอยู่อ่ะอยู่ไปเถอะ
And there's many other characters, especially female characters that are often seen caring much more about their appearance than male characters. Women in Thai dramas have two fears. One, gaining weight, and two, tanning. And there's also Pitch of Time, which yes is a K-drama but contains two Thai actors, so shh. That has a literal ghost applying sunscreen.
เวอร์กูทำอย่างเงี้ยหน้านายจะได้ไม่ดำ야 나 귀신이야
And that first aspect of the obsession with white skin shows how important and a sign of pride it is for the people who have it. So much so that they're willing to go through all the hoops to avoid losing it. But it's also very telling of how different Western colorism and Asian colorism are. Because in the West, many people want a tan skin. I mean, most of us await summer giddily at the idea of tanning under the sun on the beach. Because colorism in the West is directly linked to racism. A white person can tan a lot and it will be fun and even praised by others. I mean, we have seen the blackfishing, we have seen the insane tanning people go through just to not look as pale as they used to be. While an actual black person will get discriminated for being dark-skinned. The second aspect of the obsession with white skin is gonna be that white-skinned characters are inherently perceived as more attractive. In My Dear Loser Monster Romance, for example, Pong says that Nam King is his type because she has white skin. He is absolutely not the only character to have this type of thinking. And that type of beauty standard doesn't even stop in the fictional realm. In fact, many Thai actors have said when asked about their taste in women that they were looking for someone white-skinned. And you know, everyone can be attracted to anyone they want. I mean, with a few exceptions that I'm sure you can imagine. But it's funny how people, and especially men, will only admit to being attracted to the beauty standards. All of that obsession with white skin contributes to people who do not have that, a good chunk of people in Thailand, to feel bad about themselves. It's already hard not being the beauty standard. Its definition is so narrow and changes all the time that not many people fit into it anyway. But being reminded of it constantly by every show that airs on TV, that only twists the knife further into the wound. Dark skin as an insult to someone's beauty. And now, one level up, how fun, that game is hilarious. We have straight up insulting someone because they have dark skin. Let's start a bit tame, even though it's still terrible, with A from Love by Chance. Being clearly described as dark-skinned in a novel, and unattractive because of it. The whole idea of the AP chip, and honestly most ships out there, is to have two diametrically different characters fall in love. Pete, white-skinned, soft and rich, and Ed, dark-skinned, poor and rough. It will be noted though that Pertanapon, who was chosen to play E, isn't even dark-skinned, he's just not white-skinned. And this whole description takes us back to the origins of colorism in Asia, which is once again classism. Pete could have never been dark-skinned while E was white-skinned, because the general Thai viewer would have gotten confused, as darker almost always means poorer in Thai dramas. I'm frankly trying to think of a dark-skinned Thai actor, which those are already rare, playing a rich character, and I can only think of Shin from Three Will Be Free right now, whose dad was a mafia leader, so does it even count? I'm truly struggling to find one, and it just shows that skin color really plays a role in how the actors are casted to play which characters. We also have Oten What the Duck teasing Pop that even though he overtly takes care of his skin, which is kind of his main character trait, and he gets teased for it a lot because of toxic masculinity and homophobia. The deadliest of combo. But anyways, even though Pop takes care of his skin, always wears sunscreen and uses an umbrella under the sun, he's still darker than Oat.
เจอทั้งแดดเจอทั้งลมเจอทั้งฝุ่นนะเว้ยหน้าก็พังหมดพอดีถ้าไม่ดูแลก็เนียนนะแต่ทำไมดำจังวะดูหน้ากูดิไม่เคยใช้เลยขาวก็มึงอีก
And that scene tells us a lot, because again it shows us that white skin is seen as superior, but we knew, I think that has been established by now. But moreover, it clearly shows how fucking dumb colorism is. Because the reason Pop can be as white as Oat is because he was born with his skin and Oat was born with the lighter one. This scene clearly acknowledges that colorism is just discrimination and has no foot to stand on except for pure subjective bias that has been passed down for centuries. The only way Pop could have a lighter skin than Oat is if he bleached his skin with whitening products. Funny how that would profit $1 billion industry. Interesting. And then we have an... Not gonna lie, this one hurts. And two from Theory of Love. I know, my favorite fucking ship! It's their first interaction on the show as well, where two goes to beg An to let him charge his laptop so he can send in an assignment. And so An, being the dumbass he is, instead of being nice to the guy he's liked for literally 3 years, tries to play it cool and acts like kind of an asshole. Though that absolutely does not warrant Two's next comment, which is...
กูไม่ให้โหพี่ตัวดำไม่พอแถมใจดำอีกนะ
And wow, that's fucked up. Firstly, it is to be noted that dark heart might be a common Thai expression, but that absolutely does not make it okay. Hereby implying that Pian shouldn't have a dark heart to match his dark skin, that very obviously implies that having dark skin is as bad as having a dark heart and being mean. That immediately associates only negative stereotypes to dark skin, which is literally the definition of colorism. That is coupled with the need to point out someone's skin tone, which we've already talked about, but here it's used to shame Pian into lending him his charger. Not even mentioning that An, a fictional character, is played by darker skinned actor Ert Pirapat, who definitely has had to deal with his fair share of colorist discrimination. And I wonder, for me I don't believe that An, a side character in Theory of Love, had been assigned any skin tone in the original novel that inspired the series. In that case, that line would have been added by the screenwriters because they knew that Ert Pirapat was playing the role. If you remember my video on fat shaming, the same thing had happened to Captain Chonaton in Lovesick the series, where a few lines about no being chubby had appeared that were not in the original novel. And in both cases, this literally feels like targeted harassment. which is not okay. Another example, which I will be a bit quicker about because I've already talked about it in my fat shaming video, is Gamui Shayane's character in Fabulous 30. They really took one look at her and decided to give her the 2-in-1 combo. Also, you're dark-skinned and curvy? Let's fat shame you and say you're ugly for being dark for 13 episodes straight. Let me just play you the extracts I put in my fat shaming video because I have nothing more to add.
ใครคือเจยุ้ยเหรอ
เจยุ้ย
ไม่
เจ
ใช่
ยุ้ย
ไม่
ที่
ใช่
ดำ
โอ้
ถึ
ย
ก
โอ้ย
ๆ ใหญ่ๆ ยักษ์ๆ รู้จักปะ
ไม่ใช่ สวยก็ไม่สวย ดำก็ดำ
Once again, this feels like targeted harassment. Yui's whole role is being the dark and fat, ugly best friend who no one wants. And she's considered ugly and no one wants her because she's dark-skinned and curvy. And in every episode, they make sure to remind her. Except it's not only the fictional character being relentlessly bullied by the screenwriters, but the actress who plays her as well. Just like actors being hired to play the fat loser or the fat best friend like we saw in my fat shaming video, here you're hired to be ugly just because you're dark. Something that once again you cannot control unless you bleach your skin until it falls off. Is determining your whole life. And your country's media constantly reminding you of it is probably not very fun either. The Thai blackface equivalent. You heard me right. Yup. I've definitely left the worst category for the end. And it's when lighter-skinned actors get their skin painted darker for a role. The first example of that is Byfern in Crazy Little Thing Called Love, one of the most iconic and famous Thai movies. And when I finally watched it, I was frankly flabbergasted because I could barely recognize Byfern at first. In that role, she plays Nam, an ugly prepubescent girl who will, of course, have a glow-up in order to seduce her crush. And I would love to talk about the glow-up trope in rom-coms, especially how it messed me up as a curly-haired child with glasses, but we don't have time for that today. In order to make Byfern, who's considered one of the most beautiful Thai actresses out there, ugly, they gave her a bowl haircut, big chunky glasses, another favorite of the glow-up trope. And they darkened her skin. Yup. They did that. And then they literally show her lightening her skin in order to become pretty. Do I even have to say anything? They made her skin darker to make her uglier, equating once again for the 100th time today, ugliness to darkness. But more than that, they literally painted a new skin on Byfern, which is another kind of worms on its own. And while even though I'm calling it blackface, it doesn't have the same connotations as actual blackface in the West, where minstrel shows were used to mock black people. Here, the dark skin is used to make her seen less desirable, which means it still mocks dark-skinned people and is actually quite comparable to blackface in that aspect. And in the movie, Byfern will lighten her skin with a homemade turmeric recipe, which will leave her skin yellow for a bit, and then she turns magically into a white-skinned girl. It's almost as if the actress had been light-skinned this whole time. And I'm not even gonna talk about this basically endorsing whitening products. Because as I've already said today, it's a literal billion-dollar industry that operates in a lot of Asian countries and profits off people being insecure about their skin tone. Still to this day, there are a lot of Thai people and even Thai actors who use those kinds of products to lighten their skin. This, ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary folks, is the commodification of insecurity. But you thought that was it? No, baby, this is a recurring trope. I have two other shows with basically the same exact plot, but that I haven't watched. And usually I wouldn't talk about shows that I haven't watched. But here I think the posters and trailers really speak for themselves. The shows are Plara Song Krung and Mekua Kon Mai. And the worst thing is that the first one contains two actors I really love, which are Moku Arnit and the literal love of my life, Montanu Chai. But anyways, in both shows, the female lead disguises herself as a maid by darkening her skin and putting on a wig. Mo's character goes further by adopting curly hair, which should have worsened her case, but at this point we've already reached top bottom. In both shows, we're dealing with conventionally attractive women who end up testing the male lead's love by meeting him under their ugly form. A form that, once again, has to be dark-skinned. And the worst thing is that I'm certain those are not the only shows that darken their character's skin to make them seem less desirable in the eyes of the Thai public. And imagine the message it sends to the said Thai public when most Thai people are darker skinned than the very white standard that actors meet. So imagine these people who are constantly told by the media of their country that they are ugly for having dark skin, seeing their skin tone used as a costume to make a beautiful privileged actress look worse. Must be really fun. To conclude, colorism was really the thing that shocked me the most when I started watching Thai dramas. The fat shaming was much harsher than in Western shows, that's for sure, but it's not like it didn't already exist very loudly in the West. Colorism though is something that is much more hidden here, being mostly microaggressions and favoritism. In Thailand though, the colorism hits you in the face like a huge slap. It's something that is so loud, it feels insulting even when you're not concerned. So how must it feel when you are? When you are a dark-skinned Thai person who gets judged, called ugly and less competent because of the color of the skin you were born with. I can't imagine it gets any worse than that. And that's why I wanted to highlight this huge problem in Thai media, so that hopefully one day things can start to change. I also do want to highlight a few, very few good examples of darker skinned people in Thai dramas. Firstly, the BL series Love Poison 1 and 2, which takes place in Isan, which is regarded by the rest of Thailand as a region with a lot of darker skinned people, where Tak, one of the main characters who's considered very handsome, is a darker skinned actor. And in the second season, his love interest got replaced by also a darker skinned actor, which is a first in any Thai series I've ever seen. It's the first time I see two darker skinned actors playing a relationship, especially in BL, where very often the difference in the skin tones of the actors is meant to show who is the top and who is the bottom. I talked about it briefly in my video on the boring BL love interests, which I recommend you watch. By the way, the dark-skinned top and the light-skinned bottom is not the only use for skin tones in Thai dramas indicating a hierarchy. Very often, be it in series and even more often in lakorns, Thai soap operas, the light-skinned main lead goes against the dark-skinned villain. And it's extremely rarely the opposite. Apart from the next example, which is Shwamong Tongmon, a lakon where the female lead is a darker skinned woman, which is extremely rare because while male actors are kind of allowed a certain degree of darkness, usually it doesn't go further than Singto Prashaya, Tetawan or Earth Pirapato, women are not afforded the same luxury. I've rarely seen darker skinned Thai actresses on shows, and when they are never the main character. And very often the ugly sidekick or plainly the villain. So to have the main character be a darker skinned woman who, yes, isn't considered as inherently pretty by the show, but once she gets her glow up, removing her glasses and getting a slight sliver of a fashion sense, she's still considered good looking, which is already a step up, I guess. Especially since she is also not a stick-thin woman, which again, go watch my fat shaming video, literally does not happen. And finally, a show I haven't watched yet because it's literally not subbed anywhere, Hey Tag, which tackles the issue of colorism in one of its episodes, which honestly seems pretty revolutionary for me, and I hope it can be subbed someday soon so I can watch it. By the way, if you're Thai and would like to link up with me so we can sub this series together, I'm serious, send me a DM on Instagram and I'm down. So there is the tiniest bit of hope for darker skinned people in Thailand. But as you can see, it's only a tiny speck in a galaxy of discrimination. So we're really far away from dark skin being accepted in Thailand, or even seen as beautiful. But I think the first step would be for Thai media to stop making dark skinned people their scapegoats. Stop making everything about skin tone. Stop equaling dark skin to ugliness. Stop putting dark makeup on light skinned actresses to make them uglier. That would be a good first step. I'm hopeful that with the internet and an overall knowledge about these topics starting to be more spread out, someday we'll be able to watch Thai shows where colorism is not present anymore. And I really do hope with my whole heart that the Thai people who have been directly affected by colorism will too. I hope you enjoyed this video despite the gross topic, and I'll be waiting for your comments about it. I'll see you next time and have a great day.